Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Thousands of South Sudanese citizens are still stranded in Sudan. Gaddafi regime fires first scud missile in Libyan war. And Yemen's Saleh vows again to return home soon. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
The Syrian army withdrew from Deir az-Zour, while an official source confirmed to Sanaa news agency the continued pursuit of what he described as armed terrorist groups in Latakia, as raids continue in the Bayada and Seba neighborhoods of Homs.
The
Syrian army left its barracks in Deir az-Zour, leaving the city from its southern and northeastern entrances, as confirmed by a military source, to journalists who entered the city as part of a media tour organized by the Ministry of Information. The official said the army entered Deir az-Zour in response to a call by the residents, adding that the military carried out an exceptional and swift operation to restore security and stability in the city. He pointed out that soldiers managed to arrest gunmen and seize explosive devices and mines. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights confirmed that some Latakia neighborhoods witnessed heavy gunfire in the early morning. The observatory said the raid and military operations in Latakia have cost 34 lives in the past 4 days, including that of a 2-year-old girl who was killed amid a mass flight from the city. As for the official Syrian narrative, it confirmed through a military source to Sana news agency that law enforcement forces continue to remove roadblocks set up by the armed terrorist groups along the crossroads and alleys, notably in a Ramle al-Janubi neighborhood. In addition, the source said members of these groups were arrested and the explosive devices they planted in the neighborhood were dismantled. Law enforcement forces also seized weapons. The source confirmed that some gunmen fled from Ramle al-Janubi to nearby towns, opened fire, and threw sticks of dynamite, which led to a number of injuries. That same source said security forces are still tracking down the armed men in order to restore calm to the city. On the other hand, videos were uploaded online showing closed stores in Souk al-Maskouf and Homs, confirming it is a show of solidarity with Bab al-Sabah and al-Bayada. Those two neighborhoods have witnessed gunfire, wide-scale arrest campaigns, and raids. This comes as approximately 100 lawyers held a silent protest at the Lawyers' Chamber in the Justice Palace in the eastern Al-Raqqa. They held banners calling on the army to leave the cities and demanded a fair and impartial judiciary. Politically, London said al-Assad lost his remaining legitimacy, as Human Rights Watch demanded the European Union freeze the assets of the Syrian National Oil Company, the Syrian National Gas Company, and the Central Bank of Syria, until President Bashar al-Assad ends what the organization described as serious human rights violations.
Libyan opposition forces threatened to cut off supplies from the capital Tripoli after they achieved military gains in cities near the capital. Meanwhile, the United States said that Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's days in power are numbered. On the other hand, Chairman of the Transitional Council, Mustafa Abdul Jalil, denied that there are any direct or indirect negotiations with the Libyan regime or the UN envoy.
Residents of the Libyan capital continue their daily life as if the war is occurring in another world. Tripoli is still in the grips of the colonel and his battalions. This is the tone that people speak in here. But no one knows what the city is hiding in between its alleys. The absence of security forces does not mean any change on the ground. The ghost of the colonel's battalions is still so present in every corner of the city that it is difficult to know the true emotions of Tripoli residents after they heard the news that opposition forces had besieged their city. This chant echoes in the city of al-Zawiya, 50 kilometers west of the capital. The city, as well as Garyan in the south, appears to be under the control of Gaddafi's opponents, according to opposition sources. They also spoke of advancing from the east. Perhaps this accelerating progress explains Washington's announcement that the colonel's days are numbered. It may also explain Gaddafi's desire to use Scud missiles to shield Brega, as stated by a U.S. military source.
The tyrannical regime indeed has these missiles that it may use. This man will not hesitate to use anything in order to prolong his reign, even just for feeble advantages.
A missile hit a remote area before its damages reached Brega, which is exhausted by the clashes. The shelling did not shake the opposition fighters' determination, or at least that is what they say.
He has no ethics, we knew this. But I just want to say that this shows one thing. He will use whatever is in his capability to avoid being eliminated from power.
The colonel stays on, at least as long as his photo still hangs in Green Square in Tripoli. Meanwhile, it does not seem like the war that the Jamahiriya demands to be stopped will end anytime soon. The coming days may witness fiercer confrontations if the international mediation collapses and the secret negotiations fail to persuade the colonel to relinquish power and opens the country into a new era. Firas Kelani, BBC.
The number of registered voters in the Tunisian elections reached 3.8 million as of this past Sunday. Tunisian president of the independent high electoral body, Kamel Jandoubi, said at a press conference that the rate of registered voters reached 55% of the total potential voters.
The outcome of the registration as of August 2nd is as follows: 2,275,999 registered voters. By the end of August 14th, the number of registered Tunisian voters reached 3,882,727.
In Bahrain, the Royal Fact-Finding Committee closed its offices in Manama after being widely criticized by the Bahraini people and following the protesters' attack on its headquarters. The committee issued a statement saying public anger was directed at the head of the committee, Sharif Baisuni's conclusions on the investigation that exonerate Bahraini authorities from the crimes they committed during the peaceful protests. The statement considered these conclusions to be false, adding the committee will continue conducting interviews with the victims and witnesses to gather evidence and assess the circumstances. A number of the Bahraini people and observers believe the committee did not make a decision on the extent of the human rights violations in Bahrain and that it sympathizes with the Bahraini authorities. Opposition group Al-Wifaq National Islamic Society confirmed the popular mobilization in the country will continue until all demands are met. Meanwhile, a number of regions and villages in Bahrain witnessed a series of protests on Independence Day, during which demonstrators demanded that Saudi occupation forces leave their country.
Here in Abu Sabah, the situation is the same as other Bahraini towns and villages during the month of Ramadan. Marches continue every night to confirm the popular demands calling for freedom and reforms. Bahrainis organized a series of protests in many towns and villages in concurrence with Independence Day. They stressed their country's independence and their rejection of foreign interference in its internal affairs. In addition, protesters chanted slogans demanding the departure of the Saudi occupation forces from Bahrain. These demonstrations have been exceptionally peaceful, with protesters only waving their national flag. However, security forces cracked down on them in the same manner as in the past. The regime's forces, backed by the Saudi occupation forces, chased demonstrators, dispersing the peaceful protests by firing weapons and tear gas at them. Opposition group Al-Wifaq National Islamic Society confirmed on Independence Day the ongoing popular mobilization of Bahrainis. In a statement, the group indicated that the people of Bahrain held the highest level of restraint and peacefulness despite the security forces' crackdown. It also stressed that the protesters' ceiling of demands remains the lowest among the Arab peoples. Al-Wifaq confirmed the popular demonstration in the country will continue until all demands are met, which include an elected government, a parliament with full authorities, fair electoral districts, and an independent judiciary. Popular marches and actions have been ongoing for months, but have only been met with crackdowns by authorities. Bahrainis say Manama's government is now at a crossroads between submitting to their just demands and continuing with the language of violence and tyranny, which has led the people to lose their trust in the government.
A Bahraini court referred a number of detainees accused of incitement against the regime to the Minor Criminal Court of Bahrain. Bahraini newspaper Al-Wasat quoted attorney Mohsen al-Alawi saying the prosecution of the detained will begin on October 19th. They're accused of incitement against the regime and destabilizing the kingdom.
Our story this hour takes us to Yemen, where the embattled ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh has once again defied calls to leave power as he's promised to return home soon. Saleh is in Saudi Arabia recovering from wounds he sustained in a June attack in the capital, Sana'a. He's made the pledge in live video broadcast to thousands of tribesmen loyal to him. Saleh has labeled the political opposition as trying to take advantage of the situation. The opposition says the council is aimed at leading the revolution forces ahead to fulfill people's demand. Now, this is all taking place a day ahead of the formation of a national council by a coalition of 5 opposition parties. Yemen has been trapped in months of political impasse, with peoples demanding the regime's downfall. Well, we're going to switch over to London, where we have Yemeni writer and researcher Mr. Ali Masfari. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, how do you see the situation that is happening at this point in time? We know that tomorrow it is they're due to actually form this coalition council. Do you think they will be successful, first of all, in being able to form the council? And then where do you see Saleh in all of this at this point in time?
I think for the coalition parties, it is not possible to form this council as long as they don't have the military power in order to put also their power on the grounds for the taking over the whole country. As long as still some forces belonging or loyalist to Ali Abdullah Saleh in Sana'a or somewhere else. Unless that also the pressure must be exceeded now from Saudi Arabia in particular and the United States, as long as that they are not still having enough power to press on Saleh, and that he is going to return back. That means that Yemen is sliding now towards the brink of a civil war and the turmoil amid and growing of power vacuum.
Fierce clashes have taken place now between the Yemeni opposition tribesmen, as you just heard, and troops loyal to embattled ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh. At least 23 tribesmen have been killed, but there's no word on the regime's casualties. Now, the overnight fighting took place near the capital, Sana'a. It broke out after regime forces set up a checkpoint and deployed reinforcements in areas near Sana'a. This to prevent what they call the tribesmen plot to take control of a nearby army base in the capital's airport. Now, the tribesmen, however, accused the army of planning a war against them. The Republican Guards, led by Saleh's son, have been fighting tribesmen in various regions after several tribes sided with protesters demanding the regime's downfall.
Many South Sudanese citizens who are still in the Sudanese capital of Khartoum are enduring difficult living conditions as they are unable to find a way to return to their hometowns in their emerging country.
They are demanding that the governments of Sudan and South Sudan accelerate and facilitate their return to the south.
More details in this report from Khartoum by our Al Jazeera correspondent, Mohammed Al-Tayyib.
Waiting on the sidewalk, their luggage has become their homes after having left their homes, in anticipation of returning to their new state in South Sudan. This man and many others like him say they've spent 8 months in these circumstances as they wait for promises of help to return to their regions of origin in the country of South Sudan. And the more these promises are delayed, the more these people experience additional suffering and loss. They have long been waiting for the trip back home. There are no homes here to protect them from the changing weather and rain. Most of them just want to return to their new country in South Sudan. And despite the ongoing voluntary programs for the citizens who wish to return to South Sudan, the country is facing many obstacles. Among them are securing return convoys to the south and a lack of funds. In addition, there are no clear programs to absorb the large number of returnees to their hometowns in South Sudan.
The people need to at least have a decent place to stay. This is unacceptable. Let them see how they're living in the south. They need to at least have shelter and not leave them out in the rain this way.
However, the authorities confirm they have transported nearly 23,000 people to their homes in the south since the declaration of South Sudan as an independent country on July 9th. Tens of thousands are still across the north's provinces, waiting to learn their fate in the face of the promises by the two governments, the south and the north, that everything will proceed well.
I promise that this thing is going to be finished.
I promise that this thing is going to be finished. We will do what is required to transport these people without any problems.
Only 8 months remain for the residents of South Sudan to maintain their affairs in the north and either return to their new country or stay in a state in which they were once residents when Sudan was one country. Mohammed Al-Tayyib, Al Jazeera, Al Khartoum.
We open with a special Knesset session convened today as legislators return from summer break to address the ongoing social unrest. During the debate, hundreds of activists rallied outside as dozens clashed with security forces. More in this report from IBA's Ariel Reshef.
Earlier this month, the Knesset took their annual summer recess, but 50 opposition lawmakers petitioned to force today's special session. As the proceedings got underway, hundreds of protesters staged a rally across from the Knesset, where some activists clashed with police. Protesters say they want to return the Knesset to the people. The scuffles came after some demonstrators warned that violence could ensue if solutions are not implemented quickly. Tent dwellers congratulated the Knesset on holding a special session, but said more talk is not enough.
It's a good start to see that they come from their vacations and they don't take their time off and just don't care about what's going on. They come for a meeting and they do want to discuss. But the thing is, if they continue doing the same politics, that's it, so we didn't get anything.
Some Knesset members voiced support for the protesters and praised them for raising the profile of social issues.
I think we have a moment of grace now, because it's very rare to be able to make great changes when there's no real economic crisis and no real security crisis. But the protests create a sense of crisis, create a sense of a need to change, with a strong economy, with security calm, so we can actually do all these changes in very beneficial environment.
The protesters also received the blessing of President Shimon Peres today. Speaking to Israel Radio, Peres said that he could not remember a time when so many people from so many sectors of society got behind the same cause. Opposition leader Tzipi Livni lambasted the governing coalition for implementing defunct policies and slammed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for refusing to reopen the 2012 budget. Government is under increased public scrutiny, though experts say that Netanyahu's coalition will not disintegrate.
I do expect changes. I think the government is very interested in that. And since we don't see that the government is about to collapse, there is enough time, about 2 years, to see whether the measures taken by the government do help or not. So we'll have to wait and see.
Professor Manuel Trachtenberg, head of the government-appointed team, says his commission will listen to the suggestions of the alternative body of experts approved this week by the protesters. Nevertheless, last night activists threw shoes and shouted at representatives from the Trachtenberg committee who visited their Beersheba tent encampment. Protesters vow to continue their efforts and are planning a nationwide million-man march for September 3rd. Ariel Reshev, IBA News.
2 Palestinian-fired Grad rockets from the Gaza Strip exploded in open areas in the western Negev last night. In response, IDF warplanes attacked terror targets in Gaza. More in this report from IBA's Dennis Zinn.
Within hours of the 2 Palestinian Grad rocket attacks on the city of Beersheba last night, IDF aircraft pounded terrorist targets in the Gaza Strip, including smuggling tunnels on the Gaza-Egypt border. The Hamas rockets exploded in open areas adjacent to the Negev city, causing no injuries and no damage. Nevertheless, the army spokesman announced that Israel will not tolerate any attempt to harm Israeli citizens or IDF soldiers. During one of the air raids, a terrorist rocket launching team was targeted while setting up to fire another missile. A Hamas official reported that one of its members was killed and 4 others wounded. Some of the injured were tunnel operators. This morning, several tunnel workers were seen salvaging their equipment from the debris of the aerial attack. This tit-for-tat round of violence took place while PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas was meeting with leaders of Bosnia-Herzegovina to garner their support for the upcoming UN vote in September. Following his talks with the leaders of the Balkan state, Abbas said he is confident of their backing, even though he did not receive specific promises. However, Bosnian Foreign Minister Sven Alkalaj said, while his country is interested in helping end the conflict in the Middle East, the decision concerning the UN vote still has not been decided upon. 40% of Bosnian citizens are Muslims, and the racial divide often prevents the country's leaders from reaching a decision. Meanwhile, political commentators in the West Bank today said the upsurge in terror attacks on Israel from Gaza is the Hamas response to the upcoming UN vote. They explained that the leadership in Gaza is uncomfortable with the improved international standing of Fatah leader Abu Mazen and would prefer to scuttle the Fatah-led bid at statehood. The Hamas, for its part, announced that the rockets were launched by members of rogue terror cells, over which it has little control. Dennis Zinn, IBA News.
Despite the changes that take place every year in Kuwait during the holy months of Ramadan, many Kuwaitis take necessary steps to help uphold the month's traditions and rituals to maintain kinship and social affiliation. One way to do it is by opening diwaniyat. Diwaniyat are public gatherings or councils that serve Ramadan buffets during the holy months. Our correspondent Ahmed Al-Anaizi reports from Kuwait.
The holy month of Ramadan has a special taste in Kuwait. During this month, Kuwaitis try hard to bring to life some of the old traditions and customs they inherited from their ancestors. The hot summer temperatures have not prevented them from reflecting on these Ramadan traditions, which are aimed at strengthening their social ties. Most of the festivities take place at night due to the soaring temperatures during the day.
In the past, we used to get together during Ramadan. Now, there's hardly any gathering. Most people eat and leave due to the heat.
In the past, people used to visit their relatives. Life was simpler then. People used to visit each other. Now people use text messages to communicate with each other.
It's not only the weather that's hot. The prices of food products, especially those in high demand during Ramadan, are hot as well. What's special about Ramadan in Kuwait is the launch of the so-called Ghabhat, or large Ramadan buffets, which are open for everyone regardless of their affiliation.
Prices are not proportional to income. While income remains constant, prices continue to skyrocket.
Prices are definitely on the rise. They have risen more than 150% to unimaginable levels.
Prices rose more than 100%. For example, we used to buy a bunch of parsley for a quarter of a dinar. It jumped to more than 3 dinars.
The atmosphere of Ramadan in Kuwait is continuing to change as many Kuwaitis are busy coping with their daily responsibilities. Despite these changes, many Kuwaitis are still clinging to Ramadan traditions and customs. Ahmad Al-Lanezi, Dubai TV, Kuwait.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.